Some moments don't explode. They don't announce themselves with noise or chaos. They arrive quietly, standing inches from your dignity and daring you to disappear. That night, I learned how thin the line was between being seen and being erased. My name is Ariana Wells, and until that night, I believed that success spoke louder than skin. I believed that if I dressed well enough, worked hard enough, earned enough respect, the world would eventually meet me halfway. I was wrong. The invitation sat in my purse like a small, folded promise. Black cardstock, gold lettering, the Halcyon Room members and invited guests only, an exclusive private club tucked above the city skyline. The kind of place where deals were whispered, not signed, where reputations were born or buried over cocktails that cost more than my first car payment. I hadn't asked to be invited. I had earned it. I parked across the street and sat in my car longer than necessary, watching the entrance. Neon lights spilled onto the sidewalk, bathing the night in electric blue and violet. Men in tailored suits. Women in silk dresses that caught the light like liquid. Laughter drifted through the glass doors. Easy, careless, unquestioned. I checked my reflection one last time. Black dress, clean lines, minimal jewelry, nothing loud, nothing flashy, just me. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the noise softened, not completely, just enough for me to feel it. That subtle shift. The way conversations pause for half a second too long. The way eyes assess before they acknowledge. I had felt it my whole life. But tonight I told myself this place is different. It had to be. The bouncer stood at the door like a wall made of muscle and authority. White, broad shoulders. Earpiece curled tight against his neck. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He barely looked human, more like a gate with eyes. I stepped forward and held out my invitation. "Good evening," I said. My voice was steady. Practiced, he didn't take the card. Instead, he looked at me. Up, down, slow. Then he looked past me as if expecting someone else to appear. "Members only," he said flatly. "I'm invited," I replied, lifting the card slightly. He finally took it, didn't read it, didn't scan it, just held it between two fingers like it might stain him. "Who invited you?" he asked. The question wasn't casual. It wasn't polite. It was loaded. "I'm a guest of the board," I said. That should have ended it. Instead, it began something else. He exhaled through his nose, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sigh. "I'll need to see ID." I handed it over without hesitation. He studied it longer than necessary, then longer still. Behind me, the line grew. I could feel them, watching, waiting, judging. A white couple stepped up beside me. The man wore sneakers that probably cost more than my rent. The woman leaned into him, whispering something that made him smirk. The bouncer glanced at them and opened the door. No invitation, no ID, just a nod. They walked past me without looking. Heat crawled up my neck, not anger yet, something colder, something heavier. "Is there a problem?" I asked. The bouncer met my eyes for the first time, and in that moment I understood. This wasn't about rules, this was about permission. "I'm not seeing you on the list," he said. "I was told there was a mistake earlier," I replied carefully. "They're expecting me." He shook his head. "Tonight's not your night." The words hit harder than he intended. Not your night, as if access were weather, as if dignity were optional. Behind me, someone chuckled, a phone lifted, recording. "I'd like to speak to the manager," I said. My heart was pounding now. not because I was afraid, but because I was refusing to shrink. The bouncer's jaw tightened. "We don't need to make this a thing," he said quietly. His voice dropped, a warning. "Why is this a thing?" I asked. Silence. Thick, uncomfortable. The neon lights buzzed overhead, humming like they knew something I didn't. That's when the door opened again. Music spilled out, warm, inviting. A group of men walked out laughing, cigars in hand. One of them glanced at me, then stopped. His smile faded, and his eyes widened just a little. The bouncer didn't notice. He was too busy standing in front of me like I didn't belong anywhere behind him. But something had shifted. I could feel it, like the air before a storm. And that was the moment I realized this night wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. If this story has already pulled you in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because what happened next made the entire room go silent. There's a special kind of silence that forms when people realize something uncomfortable is happening, and they're deciding whether to pretend they don't see it. That silence wrapped itself around me as I stood there, invitation still in my hand, dignity being negotiated by a man who had already decided I didn't deserve entry. The laughter from inside the club faded as the door closed again. The music dulled. And suddenly I was very aware of my body, of how tall I stood, of how dark my skin looked under neon lights, of how alone I was in a crowd. "Ma'am," the bouncer said, lowering his voice even more, "you're holding up the entrance." I glanced behind me. The line had grown, men in tailored jackets, women sipping cocktails from crystal glasses, all of them watching me like I was a delay, not a person. "I'm not holding anything up," I replied. "I was invited." He crossed his arms. "And I said you're not on the list." Something sharp pressed against my chest, not embarrassment. Humiliation comes later. This was disbelief. Because a part of me still expected fairness to show up at the last second like it always does in stories that aren't real. "I know the managing director," I said carefully. "His name is," he cut me off. "Names don't matter if you're not cleared." That's when it happened. A woman behind me sighed loudly. "Can she move?" she muttered. "Some of us actually belong here." Belong, the word hit harder than the denial. I turned around slowly. She was smiling, polite, practiced, superior. I looked her straight in the eye. "I do belong here," I said calmly. "That's why I'm standing my ground." Her smile slipped, just a little. The bouncer stepped closer. Not touching me, not yet, but close enough that I could smell his cologne, clean, expensive, confident. "You can leave on your own," he said, "or I can have security escort you away." Escort. As if I'd wandered in by accident. As if I hadn't been invited into this space the same way everyone else had. My hands trembled. I hated that, not because I was weak, but because I was human. And this moment was forcing me to decide which version of myself I was allowed to be. The one who swallowed it and walked away, or the one who stayed and paid for it. "I'm not leaving," I said. The words were soft, but final. That's when the crowd fully turned its attention toward me. Phones came out. Whispers spread. Someone behind me said, "Here we go." The bouncer touched his earpiece. I didn't miss the subtle change in his posture. Authority summoned. 2 security guards appeared from inside, both white, both tall, both already annoyed. "What's the issue?" one asked. "She's refusing to leave," the bouncer said. No explanation, no context, just that. I lifted my invitation high enough for them to see. I was invited, I said clearly, louder now. I've done nothing wrong. One guard barely glanced at the card. This is a private establishment, he said. They can refuse service. Service. Like I was asking for a table. Not respect. The guard leaned closer. Last warning, he said. My throat tightened. I could feel the eyes on me, not sympathetic, curious. Waiting to see how this would end. Waiting to see how much I would endure. That's when a man's voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? It came from behind the glass doors. Calm, controlled, authoritative, the guard stiffened. The bouncer turned sharply. The door opened. And the man from earlier stepped fully into the light. He was older than I remembered. Silver at the temples. Expensive suit, eyes sharp enough to dissect a room in seconds. And when he looked at me, recognition flickered across his face. "Ms. Wells," he said, my breath caught. "Yes," I replied. The crowd murmured. The bouncer's confidence faltered just slightly. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," the man said, smiling politely. "You're late." Late, not unwelcome, not mistaken. Late. The bouncer swallowed. "I didn't see her on the—" "That's because," the man interrupted calmly, "she's not on the guest list." He paused, every eye locked onto him. "She's on the ownership report." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was explosive. The guards stepped back. The bouncer's face drained of color. And I stood there, heart pounding, realizing something incredible and terrifying all at once. This night wasn't just about getting inside. It was about exposing what they thought they could do. To someone they assumed had no power. But the truth was about to break this place wide open. If you're feeling this moment, stay with me. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it stands very still and lets everyone else reveal what they believe. The moment he said the words "ownership report," the night tilted. Not dramatically, not yet, but enough that everyone felt it. The bouncer's shoulders stiffened like someone had just whispered his name in a courtroom. He started, then stopped. The managing director, because that's who he was, I realized, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Is there something you'd like to explain?" he asked, looking directly at the bouncer. The man glanced at me, then back at him. "I followed protocol," he said, protocol. A word people hide behind when they don't want to say assumption. The managing director nodded slowly. "Did protocol include asking why she wasn't on the guest list?" he asked. Silence. "Or did it include deciding she didn't belong here?" The question hung in the air like smoke. No one answered. I stood there listening to them talk about me. Not to me, about me, as if I were an object being audited, a mistake to be explained. "Ms. Wells," the managing director said, finally turning toward me, "I apologize for the delay." Apology, public, clear, but my chest still felt tight, because apologies don't erase moments. They just acknowledge them. "I was invited for a reason," I said quietly. "Yes," he replied, "you were." He turned to the guards. "You can step back." They hesitated, then obeyed. The line shifted. The crowd leaned in. This was no longer entertainment. This was reckoning. The bouncer cleared his throat. "She didn't present ID at first," he said quickly. A lie, small, transparent, but dangerous. I looked at him. "I handed you my ID immediately," I said calmly. Our eyes locked. And for the first time, he looked uncertain. The managing director studied him. "Check the cameras," he said. That was all. Something changed in the air. People stopped whispering. Phones lowered. Everyone understood what that meant. Truth had been invited to the party. I felt exposed. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because this moment was no longer just mine. It was public. It was documented. And it was irreversible. "Ms. Wells," the managing director said again, softer this time, "would you like to come inside?" I looked at the door, then at the crowd, then back at him. "No," I said. The word surprised even me. He blinked. "Not yet," I added. "I want them to hear." The courage in my voice felt borrowed, like something stepping through me instead of coming from me. "I stood here," I said, turning slightly so my voice carried, with an invitation, with ID, with nothing to hide. My hands had stopped shaking. I was questioned, doubted, threatened with removal. I looked directly at the woman who told me to move. Her face had gone pale, all because someone decided I didn't fit the picture. No one interrupted. No one laughed. The neon lights flickered softly overhead like they were listening too. "This isn't about a club," I continued. "It's about how easily dignity is withheld when people think they're untouchable." I exhaled slowly. "I belong here. But even if I didn't, this shouldn't happen to anyone." The managing director nodded, slow, respectful. "You're right," he said. Then he turned back to the bouncer. "Step aside." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The bouncer moved, physically, but emotionally he collapsed. The doors opened fully. Warm light poured out, music swelled. The world I'd been denied suddenly made space for me, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't step forward. "Why don't you go in?" Someone whispered behind me. I turned. It was the woman who had told me to move earlier. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I held her gaze anyway. "I will," I said, "but on my terms." I finally stepped inside, not because I was allowed, but because I was recognized. Behind me, the door closed, and outside, consequences were beginning to take shape. Once inside, I realized the club wasn't just a collection of luxury, laughter, and exclusivity. It was a stage. A stage where power performed itself quietly, elegantly, and mercilessly. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting every footstep remind them I was present, that I existed, that I belonged. The music softened as eyes tracked me. Not with admiration, not with curiosity, with calculation. I felt it, too, the invisible grid of influence, the networks, the alliances, the whispered contracts that could break lives in a sentence. And then I saw her. A woman sitting near the bar, mid-30s, sharp features, and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. She was reviewing papers, a drink untouched beside her. Her expression was calm but unreadable. This was the person who had truly sent the invitation, not the board, not the bouncer, not even the managing director. "Ms. Wells," she said, looking up, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for coming." I blinked. "Of course, but why?" She smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and sorrow. "Because there's more at stake than a night out. There's a record of wrongs that need exposure, and someone has to see them for themselves." I frowned, unsure. "What do you mean?" Her gaze swept across the room. "You've seen how easily people doubt, deny, and dismiss. The world you just walked into, it reflects much more than cocktails and velvet ropes. It reflects assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't." And tonight, she said, leaning forward slightly, we make them accountable. A chill ran down my spine. I had expected humiliation, dismissal, maybe even anger. But I hadn't expected this, a calculated reversal orchestrated for maximum exposure. Suddenly, she motioned toward a large screen at the far end of the club. A presentation began. Names, events, dates, incidents of discrimination, over and over, detailed, documented. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some turned pale. Others whispered nervously to companions. All of them realized they were being held accountable, quietly, publicly, permanently. I felt my own chest tighten. Part fear, part vindication. I had never sought revenge. I had only sought access, respect, acknowledgement. And here it was, being delivered in the most unlikely, cinematic way imaginable. The bouncer from outside, still stationed near the doorway, swallowed hard. The managing director's hands twitched as he gripped his drink. The woman who had whispered at me earlier, the one who had sneered, now avoided eye contact entirely. No one had predicted this. No one had planned for accountability to arrive like this. I looked at the woman who had sent the invitation. "Why me?" I asked. Her expression softened. "You were chosen because you have the courage to stand. The same courage the rest of this room refuses to show when confronted with truth." And then it happened. A man from the back, a board member, previously silent, rose. He cleared his throat. I didn't realize," he began, his voice faltering. "My apologies," others followed. Whispers turned to murmurs. The room began to shift, the hierarchy trembling subtly but undeniably. For the first time that night, I felt a real kind of power. Not mine alone, but a shared catalytic force. A force that made people uncomfortable. A force that demanded acknowledgement. A force that could not be ignored. And yet, even as relief and validation washed over me, a shadow lingered, because exposure is only the first step. The twist, the true reckoning, had not yet come, and when it did, it would shake the foundations of everyone in that room, including me. The room felt heavy, not just with luxury or whispers or the soft music still playing in the background. Heavy with realization, heavy with the weight of accountability, heavy with the truth that had been carefully hidden for far too long. I stood near the bar, feeling both exposed and strangely untouchable. I had been humiliated outside, questioned, made to feel as if I had no right to exist in that space. And now I had become the focal point of a quiet, undeniable reckoning. The woman who had sent my invitation approached. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. "Because what happens next, it's not just for them, it's for you too." I nodded. I didn't fully understand yet, but I trusted her. Because she had orchestrated this entire evening, and she had seen the cracks in power before I even did. The screen flickered. A name appeared. Someone very familiar to me. Someone who had looked down on me, judged me, dismissed me. The crowd went still. The man in question, the very one who had once sneered at my presence, assumed my inferiority, felt it immediately. The kind of realization that makes a person shrink, even in a room full of people who had their own sins to hide. "You see," the woman said, her voice calm but commanding, "disrespect has consequences. Humiliation has consequences. Assumptions have consequences. And tonight we let truth speak." The board member whose name flashed on the screen tried to turn pale. He shifted his weight. He muttered something under his breath, but no one heard because everyone was listening. Everyone was watching. I realized then that this wasn't just about being denied entry. It wasn't about the bouncer's smirk or the sneers from the crowd. It was about the countless moments in life where people like me, Black women, are made to feel invisible, made to feel unworthy, made to doubt themselves. And now the world, or at least this room, had to see. The woman handed me a microphone. "Tell them," she said. The crowd froze. Every gaze was on me. I inhaled. The weight of months, years, and decades pressed down, but I stood tall. "I am here," I began, voice steady, controlled, yet full of fire. "I am invited, I am capable, I am worthy. And if this room cannot recognize that, the truth will force you to." Murmurs spread, some supportive, some defensive, some silently calculating how to undo what was happening. But the momentum had shifted. The humiliation they had once wielded as power had begun to consume them instead. Then the twist hit. The woman, my unseen ally, stepped back toward the screen. She pressed a button. A live feed from outside the club appeared. The bouncer, the doorman, the very people who had denied me entry now caught on camera admitting who I was and what they assumed. The crowd gasped. Phones lifted. Recordings began. And the man who had once whispered behind his hand, mocking my presence, turned crimson. The room erupted, not with violence, not with chaos, with truth. Suddenly, everyone who had assumed they were untouchable realized they were under scrutiny. And for the first time that night, I laughed, not quietly, not politely, a laugh that shook off years of imposed shame. "You see," the woman whispered to me, "they thought this was about exclusion, it was about exposure, and now it's theirs to bear." I nodded, tears pricking at the edges of my vision, tears of relief, tears of vindication. But even as triumph washed over me, I knew the night wasn't finished. Because the final reckoning hadn't yet arrived, and the people who had humiliated me, they would not forget tonight. The bouncer approached. "Ms. Wells, I held up my hand. "No apology, not yet. Not until you understand what this means. Not until you see how many others you've dismissed in your life." He swallowed. He nodded and stepped back. I felt the power shift in real time. The once dreaded entrance was no longer a barrier. It was a stage, and I had taken it. The room had shifted. What was once heavy with judgment and privilege was now saturated with truth. Every whisper, every sneer, every smirk had turned inward. The walls themselves seemed to tremble with the weight of accountability. And yet, my story wasn't over. I looked at the bouncer, the man who had denied me entry, made me feel invisible. "I want you to understand something," I said, voice steady but firm. "This isn't personal. It's about everyone who has been dismissed, underestimated, or told they don't belong." His eyes widened. The truth landed on him like a stone. The managing director approached me. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "Not just you, but the consequences of my negligence." I nodded. Recognition was enough. He didn't need forgiveness. Not yet. Then the woman, the orchestrator of this night, stood again. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing through the club, "this is what happens when assumptions are exposed. This is what happens when truth is allowed to speak." She gestured toward the live feed screen. It played the bouncer, the doorman, even some of the board members admitting, stumbling, defending themselves. The crowd was silent, some frozen, some ashamed, some recording every word. I stepped forward. The microphone in my hand felt lighter than before. I could feel the strength of years I had carried in my chest, the indignities, the microaggressions, the assumptions about who I was or wasn't. And tonight I had power, not over them personally, but over the narrative. I am here, I said, letting the words flow like a river, not because I wanted recognition, not because I craved validation, but because I refused to let silence dictate my value. And tonight, you've seen that exclusion is not authority, dismissal is not judgment, and humiliation is not truth. The woman behind me smiled. "You've done it," she whispered. I exhaled, letting the tension leave my body in slow waves. And then the twist. From the back of the room, a group of staff members stepped forward. They had been quietly documenting the club's systemic bias for months. Tonight, their reports were verified. The managing director, once a figure of authority, was now confronted with undeniable evidence of discrimination and misconduct. One by one, those who had attempted to wield power over me were held accountable. Contracts were reviewed. Positions were questioned. Names and actions were recorded. The bouncer, still standing near the entrance, swallowed hard. I didn't know," he stammered. "You did," I replied calmly. "And now everyone will know too." Phones were raised. Social media feeds would carry this story far beyond these walls. News would spread. Accounts would be verified. The world outside would see what the people inside tried to hide. I stepped off the stage, not with arrogance, not with revenge, but with dignity restored. The room had been a courtroom, and tonight justice had been delivered quietly, publicly, and irrevocably. The woman who had orchestrated everything placed a hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just take the stage," she said softly. "You changed the rules of the game." I smiled. Outside, the neon lights no longer felt like intimidation. They felt like recognition, like permission. I had walked in as the dismissed, and I left as the recognized. For the first time in years, I felt seen, truly seen. And in that recognition, I found a freedom that no insult, no denial, no exclusion could ever take away again. This night would be remembered, not because of the club, not because of the humiliation, but because one Black woman refused to be invisible. And when the crowd finally understood that, the doors, both literal and metaphorical, opened wide. If this story moved you, if it made you feel the weight of injustice, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes in courage, truth, and resilience. Because sometimes, standing your ground doesn't just change your life, it changes the world.